My favorite game of all time is Innovation, a card game by Carl Chudyk in which players are building a civilization in a fairly abstract manner, starting in prehistory and moving through multiple ages until they reach the required number of achievements based on the player count in order to win the game. The game consists of 105 cards, each with a different power. And the game is incredibly varied based on how the cards come out, in which order, and which powers come into play. Some games you won't even see certain cards because you remove cards from the first 9 ages to make the achievements. So the card you're looking for, if you want a specific power, may not even be in the game. You have to adapt to what comes up. And every game is very different, and yet, having now played more than 200 times in real life and another 100 games online, you see patterns over time for how things develop, and you learn how to adapt to what comes and get better at what you're doing. Now, I'm not talking about innovation today. That will be another video. Instead, I'm going to talk about Friedemann Friese's Faiyum, a game that, while not similar at all, is very reminiscent of innovation in how it plays. Let me give you an overview. Here's the game board for Faiyum, set up and ready to play, with the only difference based on player count being the number of reputation tokens that start on the track at 0. You are an architect of Pharaoh, and your goal is to gain more reputation than each other player. Nothing else matters, and everything that you do on the board does not belong to you, it belongs to Pharaoh. So these are all resources available to all players. The game board consists of 2 peninsulas, and you will be developing the board over time. You start with a hand of 5 cards and a bit of money. And on a turn, you are going to do one of 3 things. You can play a card from your hand into your personal discard pile. If there's something in red, then you must pay that cost. If there's something in green, that's the benefit you get from doing the action. And this shows you what the action is, with the card being explained in detail in the included glossary. For a farmer, you're going to place a worker upright next to another upright worker on the board, but the board starts with only crocodiles, so you can go anywhere you wish. If you go where a crocodile is, you remove it, you get $1 from the bank because presumably you are selling that crocodile for meat somewhere. And you get grapes because you put a worker into the grapes region. Now, money and the resources that you acquire belong to you. This stays in front of you and no one else can spend your money or take your resources. These are the things you have available to you to take actions elsewhere with your cards. So perhaps another player goes and places a farmer here, and someone else goes here, and so on. We might clear out some area. We get back to your turn. You do another farmer as well, because again, initially you start with almost nothing. So you need to get some stuff. So I get stone. Perhaps my turn comes around again, and I decide I want to play the 2 roads card. Where, with that, you must build exactly 2 roads. Roads must start from a settlement or a building site, or they must extend a road that is already there. And you have to pay a resource of the type of space on one end of the road. So with this road here, I must pay a grape. With this road, I can pay a grape or a stone. So I pay those 2, put them back in the resource supply, and I get 3 reputation. Where am I building? It's a road to nowhere right now. There's nothing in particular that I am trying to do other than just get reputation. It may look pointless, but Pharaoh likes it, so I'm good. Another thing you can do instead of playing a card is to buy a card. The cards are in the marketplace here. You have 4 cards that are available for purchase, with the other 4 cards being visible but not available yet. This mechanism was used in Friedemann Friese's Power Grid, and he is reusing it here with some modifications. The cards are available for a cost of 3, 4, 5, 7, and at the start of the game, the cards are discounted by 1, and cards will be discounted over time in a way I'll explain later. So when you purchase a card, this one costs 3, you put it directly into your hand, and you have it available for use in the future. You turn over a new card from the deck, you put the card in number order, because the cards are numbered evenly from 2 to 128 in the deck here. And so the 4 lowest numbered cards are available for purchase. You do not put a discount marker here. The farm slides down and now someone can buy a farm. However, you need grape and stone. You need a wheat area that has a road to it. We're not there yet, but you can see what's available in the market, and that gives you some direction for what you might want to do. Although, of course, someone else may buy this card instead of you. So if you set roads in the wheat area, they may get to build farms before you. But you can see what's available here and somewhat try to plan ahead. On a future turn, I can play this. I can place a supplier into a settlement. You start the board with only 1. It does not have to be connected to anyone else. And I get 2 resources of the type I want, possibly fish. What are fish useful for? Well, they can help you build an expansion on a workshop, but we have no workshops. A farm is one type of workshop. You're looking at all these things and saying, I don't even know what any of this means. I can do a tax collector for workshops and a settlement with a cylinder on it. The cylinder is a town. Oh, and here's a card that will let you make towns. Okay. A tax collector can get you lots of money if there are lots of workshops and towns on the board, but we have none of that right now. This is all looking very far ahead for what you can possibly do in time when these cards are available for purchase, and that will depend on how the cards come out of the deck. All right, so I place a supplier here. Maybe I want to fish to plan ahead, or more directly, maybe I want to plan ahead for the farm. I will buy or purchase stone and grapes with my supplier. Now I have another turn. I don't have enough to buy a settlement because I do not have those resources. You can replace any one of these 3 basic resources with 3 money. If you want, you have a reminder card that tells you you can buy one of these with 3 money. You can buy at most 1. You can't just use a ton of money in order to replace resources. I have only 1 money at the time. You can additionally discard a card and just take 2 money from the bank. If you don't want to put a farmer down and do something, I can take 2 money, and now I've got enough to make a settlement on the next turn. Assume, of course, other people are doing things as well, but now I can spend this, and this, with these 3 counting as wheat. I put a settlement on the board. Settlement must go in a crocodile-free space. I can put it connected to this road here. I will get 3 reputation. I'll get 3 money, because I guess Pharaoh really likes that. And the first time that you connect a settlement and a building site with a road, you get 1 extra point. So that can happen when you build a settlement. That can happen when you build roads. 1 extra point. I have no cards in hand. I have 3 money. I could purchase something. Or the third action available on a turn, other than playing a card, other than buying a card, is administration. For administration, let's put the summary card here. You're going to get 3 money minus the number of cards in hand. So I have no cards in hand, so I will get 3 money. The more you play cards, the more money you'll get for administration. However, there's a downside to that sometimes. You can remove 0 to 2 workers from the board. And the reason why you might want to do that, well, I have a supplier that can only go into a settlement, and both settlements are occupied right now. If I remove them, and then in the future when I play this card, I'll get stuff. Each space can have at most 1 worker, so if you don't remove them, you can never play here again. So I can remove up to 2 workers. I get 2 money for that. You then take back the top 3 cards into your hand for free. Additionally, you can pay $1 to get back the top card on the deck, and you can keep doing this as many times as you want. So The only way to get cards out of your hand permanently is to put them in your discard pile and never pick them up. Mostly, that's how it works. Okay, so maybe I decide these 4 cards are enough right now for whatever I plan to do. Let's go to the last part of administration. You replace the 2 lowest numbered discounted cards with new cards from the deck. What do these cards do? I should give you a little overview. So with Sacrifice, you're going to place a stone into a building site, each of which has a limited number of spaces available. You are then going to remove 1 card in your hand or your discard pile or this card itself from the game. So here is one way to remove cards from the game permanently, and you get reputation and money. You have made a sacrifice. This card here, this one's also going away. This is a crook. You can place someone in a settlement, and again, has to be a settlement with no one there. You can pay a reputation and you get 4 money, and you can do that up to 3 times. Your name is Mud, but you have lots of money available to you to buy cards and possibly do other things. However, those 2 cards are going away at administration. You turn over 2 new cards and slot them into their appropriate spot after discounting any cards remaining in these 4 spaces here. So slide, slide, slide. There we go. We have a thief. When you play the thief, you get to take any of the cards in these 4 spots here. You put it in your discard pile. You put the thief on top. So the thief is pocketing a card for you to get later during administration, but he does nothing for you at that time. We've got a fisher who must go next to someone on an undeveloped river space adjacent to the river or the lake, and you get some fish, which has some use. You get 3 fish, which is awesome. But again, very few cards right now require fish, only the expansion, for which we have no workshops. There's a lot to absorb here. Generally, when explaining a game to someone, especially before playing it, you want to give an overview of what's possible in the game. And that can be really difficult for certain games, such as the previously mentioned Innovation, which has 105 different cards. I cannot possibly give an overview of what every single card does, so you don't know what to anticipate the first time that you're playing the game, especially the alternate win conditions that start appearing in the deck that will surprise you, or possibly an opponent will surprise you with them by playing it and then winning, and you didn't even know that was a possibility, which might tick you off. But that's kind of the nature of the game, and Faiyum is along the same lines as that, especially because it has 56 different regular cards that will do mostly different things, and you can't learn all of them ahead of time. You see what's available on the market, you see the 4 cards that are in reserve that may or may not slide down and become available for purchase depending on whichever cards flip up. And then you have a little endgame deck of 12 cards. There's 4 disaster cards in that deck. There are 4 yellow bordered cards that are the otherwise highest numbered cards, and they're in-game scoring cards. Ways to do great things like build a palace or a grand bridge, and it takes lots of resources or money, and it gets you a huge number of points. You know those are in the deck, but of course it's hard to build for them because you don't know when they will become available. It's after everything else. Additionally, you have 4 other cards that are shuffled in with those, and those 4 cards are revealed at the beginning of the game. But if you have not played the game before, they mean nothing to you. You can't plan for them. There's nothing going on. It doesn't matter. There's so much potential overhead if you were trying to absorb every single thing that you can do in the game. You can't do that. You just have to march in there and say, well, I can put this here and I can get stone. I can do this here and I get wheat. And now I can make a road. 2 roads, in fact. I'll do that. And you get some points and you move along. And then cards get added to the game and suddenly you're like, I can have a bakery. I can have a vineyard. I can make a town. Oh, here's an additional way to get a settlement. And then you start seeing things layered more and more on the card, and things will become better over time, where initially you place a farmer, now you've got the supplier, which I showed you, where you get 2 resources of your type, and then there's the senior farmer, and then a senior supplier, and a wheat supplier, which will give you a lot of wheat at once, and you can start specializing in certain things. But the order that all of these cards comes out in just depends on how the deck was shuffled and how they will be revealed. And again, the 4 lowest numbered cards are available, so in general, you're going to have the easier, less powerful cards come out first, but that doesn't always happen. So every game that you play is going to be very different, and you just don't know what to anticipate. You have to muddle along and do the best you can with what's there. The hard part, though, is that, like innovation, you can be surprised by the end of the game. So you're going to go through the deck of regular cards, and then you're going to start drawing from that smaller 12-card deck that includes, again, 4 disasters, 4 yellow-bordered cards, and 4 other cards at random. When the 4th disaster is revealed, and you're revealing 2 cards at a time in administration, in a 2 and 3 player game, only 1 card in a 4 and 5 player game, and of course 1 card at a time when someone is just buying a card from the market. When the 4th disaster card is revealed, administration goes away. You can never get more cards in your hand except what you buy from the market. All you can do at that point is buy a card, play a card, and take a disaster card and step out of the game. You decide there's nothing else that you can do with the cards you have in your hand, so you take a disaster card that is worth a certain number of victory points, and those points will decline as more players step out of the game. So the person who steps out first gets the most, but of course they can't do anything else. So the timing of the game involves you knowing that this end stage is coming and preparing for it. I played Faiyum 3 times on a review copy from 2F Spiele, and in 2 of the 3 games, people got very lucky in that the final disaster card did not flip over when they did not anticipate it. They had a very small hand size, and if that 4th disaster had come up, they essentially would be done and earn nothing else. But they lucked out, and that didn't happen. They had an administration turn and were able to pick up lots of their cards and then do many things in that final stage of the game. I played 3 times, once each with 2, 3, and 4 players, and the number of points you score in that end game can be phenomenal, depending upon how you set yourself up in terms of the resources you have and the money you have available, and of course the cards you have in hand. In the 2-player game, I scored more than 60 points with my final stuff. I did not catch the leader because he had been scoring repeatedly over the course of the game. He also scored 20 points or so with his final set of cards. And my 60-something didn't quite catch him. It was a lot of points, though. So you will score maybe a third of your total points in that final section of the game. It's hugely important, and yet the first time you play, you might be surprised by it and caught short, and you've played a 2-hour game, and then suddenly you're done. Which is, again, sort of like innovation, although innovation generally is not 2 hours. But Faiyum is this experience game where you're going along the best that you can without a real plan. And now, even that I've played the game 3 times and I have some idea of what's in the market, what's in the deck and what I can possibly do, you still can't necessarily plan for that because cards will come up in the market in a random manner, and I might not be the next person who has an opportunity to buy a card, and I might not have money on me to buy a card immediately, so I can't take advantage of the card that comes up that might be ideal for what I'm doing. It's hard to plan for those circumstances. You have to assemble things on the fly because, again, you start all in the same situation with each other player with only the 5 starting cards and a bit of money. And you have no plan for what you're trying to do, and you just have to play off of what others are doing and try to carve your own niche for what is going to work for you. Essentially, you have to build your own engine from the cards that you buy that ideally all work together. So in my first game, a 3-player game, someone put together an engine in which they had a gardener, I believe the senior gardener, where you place them near the river, if I remember correctly, and you get 2 roses. Roses are a wild resource that can represent any of the other 4 resources: wheat, stone, grapes, fish. And then they had a card that would let you exchange the roses for reputation. And there was some other card inside there as well that also did things. And they essentially had this 3-card engine where they would play the 3 cards, and administration then pick them up, and then play them again and pick them up, and so on. It was, I would say, a not very interesting strategy, but of course it was the first game we played, and none of us knew what to expect or to watch out for the guy who was putting together a 3-card engine to do something fairly profitable in terms of reputation constantly. Another player, not me, put together a 4-card engine where they were getting stones and building on the building sites, essentially just building the pyramids and getting lots of reputation that way. And so they had a 4-card cycle and the 3-card cycle, and I just ended up buying lots of cards because that is often what I do in games. I like opportunities and variability and all sorts of wild things happening, and I was quite far behind them in reputation because they were just hammering that engine repeatedly, and I was trying to do something else and thinking that the game would go on further, or I could build something bigger. I didn't know exactly. I was just doing stuff, which I'm just going to pull up innovation here again because that's what this game is. This game is all about finding something you can do that is going to gain you points or splay your cards out to give you more icons, which generally gives you more power, and you're just hammering that advantage repeatedly until time passes and that's no longer useful, or the opponent finds some way to counter that. And Faiyum works along the same lines, where you can hammer that engine repeatedly. And we realized far too late that the person building roses needed an undeveloped space in which to get the roses. And so if we developed all those areas next to the channel that separates the 2 peninsulas, they could not do that. We realized that way too late. There was no way to anticipate that because we didn't know anything about the cards in the game. We didn't look through them all in advance. You just play as we went. But we were looking out for that the next time we played with 4 people, and we're more aware of what's possible, where you're trying to pull the reins in on other people based on what they can do. We now know, for example, that there is an escort card where you can take a worker that is standing in a settlement and you move it along roads to other settlements. You have to pay money to do that because you're paying for the escort to go along, some high-valued person that you're escorting them through the settlements, and then they're removed from the board at the end, and you get a bunch of reputation. So if you think that's something that you want to plan for, then you're going to build lots of networked settlements that are connected with roads. But again, you don't know if you're going to get escort or not. And then once you pick up that card, no one else wants to do that thing, so you kind of have to make it work for yourself. It's a very weird and interesting system because it is so open and varied and dependent upon what everyone else is doing, because other people will take the spots that you want to go to and you can't get that resource. They will build the road that you are going to build. They will build a settlement that connects the roads and get the bonus points for that, or build a road that connects settlements that are already there. There's all these things where you're reacting to other people and playing off them, and you'll have this mini plan for the next few turns for what you're trying to do, and then some card will turn up on the market and you say, I think I can fit that in. At least I do. And then I lose horribly. All 3 games. you'll be distracted, or there'll be some impediment because someone will place a worker where you needed to go to get the resources that you wanted. I want to put a guy into a bakery in order to get money. I need wheat for that. I get reputation. I get lots of money, and then I can use that money for this other thing I'm trying to do. And maybe that falls apart. And then so you have to take an administration turn to remove the worker from the board. But of course, other people can respond to that because they won't have turns before you and can just put the worker back or do something else or take the card that you wanted or do these other things. So again, you're responding to what other people do, trying to work your engine repeatedly and make the best of it. And you've got these big endgame cards that you're looking at them and you get 15 points off building a grand palace or 12 points off the bridge. And that looks really awesome compared to all these other cards that only give you 3 points for building roads or a settlement or whatever it is. And yet you are going to be using those cards 4 or 5 times, which then gives you 12 or 15 points. It just costs a lot more resources than those endgame cards. So it's interesting to try to figure out the balance for everything that you want to do. And again, a lot of this is just going with the flow, reacting to others, figuring out what you want to do, and then going from there. The game is listed at 120 minutes. There we go. 120 minutes. And that's been accurate, I will say. Once we get a sense of what's going on in the game, maybe you can speed it up a little, but it's a game in which there are dozens and dozens of turns that are usually fairly small, and they just compile over time to amount to something. Again, networked with what other people are doing. You are not building stuff in a bubble, and other people are going to react to what you're doing, possibly with the two of you building these sort of interconnected engines that will allow each of you to profit as one of you profits? Maybe? Or not. I've played only 3 times. And it feels weird to... I can't talk about strategy. I can't talk about overview. I mean, I did terribly in those 3 games. But it's fascinating to see. And again, this is what brings up the reminders of innovation, is just the whole idea of you starting with nothing, on the same page with everyone else, building into this empty game space that is affected by what everyone is doing, in which you try to build an advantage that you can just hit repeatedly until you are forced to move on or something better comes along. And then ideally you get to the end of the game prepared to win before your legs are knocked out from under you by something unexpected or something you just failed to see coming because you weren't paying attention. The games are very similar. Another game someone mentioned, Gizmos, Phil Walker Harding game from Simon, is similar in that, again, you're starting from nothing, you're dependent on what comes, you're building up your own engine. It's not really a shared game space like these games, but you are very open and must respond to what is available to you, and you react and build and keep going. And it's fascinating to see that. And in some ways, you have to be willing to play terribly and lose just to learn and ideally do better down the road. With innovation, I felt like I played 24 times before I really had a handle on what I was doing and how to play. And then I started getting better at it. And that was in 2010. 2021, lots of times we don't give games the luxury of that. We play them once or twice and we're like, yeah, okay, I feel like I've seen it. Well, let's move on. And that's hard with Faiyum because every game is going to be different, partially based on the player count, just because it's a very different feel with 2 and 3 and 4 players. 2 players, our scores ended up around 130, 140. With 2 players, it was more like 80. 4 players, I think it was about the same actually. But you've got a different pace to the game because only 1 card is being removed from the market versus 2, so it's a different pace how things go. It feels very different, and then things develop very differently, again, just based on how the cards come out. And so you're in the midst of this experiment almost, and that's what Friedemann Friese does. He designs games that are often based on a concept, and then you get to play in that concept. Fine Sand and 504 and Foppen and other types of things where it takes a game concept, Copycat, Factory Manager, there's all sorts of things. They take a concept that you're playing in, and then ideally it works for you. And sometimes it's just playing around to figure out how the thing even functions. And what is it like to play this? And then you'll get better over time. That's the goal anyway. I played 3 games. I haven't touched the solo game yet, where you've got certain goals that you're trying to reach. You reach 150 reputation. That's like the first winning game for the solo game. And then you got a campaign where you've got different goals you're trying to achieve. Build both grand bridges. Build both palaces, get 250 reputation, do all these other things, you check them off as you do them, and ideally you do all 7, and you complete the campaign. And then there's like a different campaign that you go along as well. Let me mention as well, before I wrap up here, that I edited the rules for Faiyum, and I feel pretty good about it. Often I edit rules without playing a game, as was the case here, and then I see the game, and I was like, oh, yeah, I definitely would have explained things differently if I had all the bits in front of me and was playing it and really knew what I was describing. But I feel pretty good about how this one came out. The game has a lot to absorb, especially because you get into the specific rules about placing farmers in an undeveloped region next to another upright worker. That's a lot of detail to absorb, and we messed up in our first games because I was not paying attention on that, even though I had edited the rules. That happens sometimes. When you place a settlement, it has to go on a crocodile-free space that is at least 1 space away from other settlements. It can go adjacent to building sites. We assumed initially it cannot, but that was us assuming things instead of just going by exactly what's in the rules. You have to do that. You look at the rules, you learn over time, there's little details here, and there's kind of these overlaying networks of things with spaces being developed or undeveloped based on whether they have road settlements or building sites on them. If they do, they're developed. If not, they're undeveloped. Is the space crocodile free? Well, maybe. Okay, but that could be developed with crocodiles or undeveloped with crocodiles. Our spaces with towns. Our spaces adjacent. Spaces are adjacent only if they're on the same peninsula. The 2 can never be adjacent. So if you have a farmer on one border side of the peninsula, the other side across the channel is not adjacent, and you cannot go there. And you can't go over a bridge to move a farmer into a different region. All the little details that are tough to absorb, and it's a lot going in. But I want to do it more because I like exploring what's here. I like what I've seen so far. I like the variability of it. Again, I edited the rules. I was not paid to edit the rules. I edited the rules because Board Game Geek partnered with 2F Spiele to serve as a distribution partner for Faiyum as well as Finishing Time, because it was a crazy year, 2020, and 2F did not have partners that wanted to sign on and do versions of the game. So Board Game Geek said, we like you guys, we'll distribute your games. And I edited the rules because I wanted to make sure we were selling something that had nicely done rules. All sorts of details there. So there is a basic overview of Faiyum. Essentially, I'm saying when you play, they're just throwing you in the pool and you have no idea what you're doing. And you can't even conceive of what's going to come or how to build towards this endgame that's coming at you 2 hours later with a board state that you cannot even anticipate. And it doesn't necessarily matter because you just have to do the best you can while the game is proceeding and then prepare for that endgame. Watch the deck. That little deck is going to go down relatively quickly, faster than you expect, because you get to that point and everyone's going to administrate, possibly with lots of cards going, and you want to be ready to make that final push with everything in your hand, ideally with the board free of workers who are going to impede your movements, which I did not do in that final, my most recent game with 4 players. I had not removed enough workers from the board, and so a lot of spaces were not available to me. I was not able to bake, which would give me money, with which I could then convert to points with a particular card I had. I'm not any good at the game, but I love the concept of the game and want to explore it more. And now I've given you some idea of what's coming, just barely touching the actual details of gameplay beyond play a card, buy a card, administrate to set up, and do it again. Hopefully that's enough.